scale of the violations, the scale of the disaster, because there is really no other word to describe it, that we're seeing in Gaza is far greater in many ways that we expected, simply because no television footage or no pictures that we saw before that were coming out of Gaza can really capture the scale of the destruction. First and foremost is obviously the large number of civilian casualties. The death toll has now gone past 1,300 people, many of whom were civilians, and including hundreds of children.
Well, both Israel and Hamas have declared unilateral ceasefires that came into effect on the 18th of January. That's largely stopped the bloodshed, and that's stopped effectively the killing of civilians, and Amnesty International wholeheartedly welcomes that. But much more needs to be done, and much more needs to be done urgently. First of all, Israel must allow in humanitarian aid, that's food, water and medicines. It must be done in an unrestricted way. They've got to lift the blockade that's been imposed on Gaza for over 18 months. And crucially, those who've committed war crimes and other grave abuses of international law in this recent conflict must be held to account.
Even though Gaza has seen a lot of destruction, especially in the last 8 years, carried out by Israeli forces, it is now really quite unprecedented. People who had fled their home during the fighting began to return to their home yesterday, and thousands and thousands of people are now realizing that they don't have a home to go to anymore.
Well, the first priority must be for humanitarian aid to be allowed in an unfettered way into Gaza, because it's got to meet the urgent needs of Gaza's beleaguered population after such a devastating military campaign there in the recent weeks.
Another issue that had been talked about a lot, and that obviously we could not confirm for certain until we were able to look for ourselves, is the use of white phosphorus. And since we're here, since we've been here, we have seen white phosphorus having been used quite extensively in and around civilian residential areas in Gaza City, in the outskirts of Gaza City and in the north, as well as around houses. It has also been used in attacks that were carried out by Israeli forces against UN facilities.
White phosphorus is a type of artillery ammunition. The contents is a chemical that ignites when it comes in contact with oxygen. What we're experiencing here is that white phosphorus is not being used as a smoke screen. It's being used in an airburst role. You've got pieces of white phosphorus. This is burning, falling down in a highly densely populated area.
People, civilians, including quite a number of children, who were burned by the white phosphorus, ended up in hospital, and doctors had no idea how to treat them, because this is the first time that they had seen these burns, because they were treating the burns as conventional burns, and then the situation of the patients deteriorated rapidly. The burns actually got deeper, and a number of patients died as a result. As well as around houses, it has also been used in attacks that were carried out by Israeli forces against UN facilities. The field operation headquarters in Gaza City of the UNRWA, the main UN agencies that feeds 2/3 of the population of Gaza, there the white phosphorus caused a very extensive fire which destroyed several vehicles and, most importantly, several tons of food, other non-food relief items, and a warehouse full of medicines.
There must be an urgent, immediate and independent, impartial investigation set up to look at evidence of war crimes. It must compile this evidence of war crimes and other crimes under international law, because at the end of the day, without accountability, there can be no sustainable, just peace. And that's why we've gone to the UN, and we're asking the UN, and preferably the Security Council of the UN, to order this investigation. It must be an investigation that has authority, and it must be an investigation that is impartial. Israel has an obligation to make full reparations to individual victims of Israel's unlawful acts in Gaza. And that means victims, for instance, of direct attacks by Israeli forces against civilians and those attacks that were disproportionate. Our message to Hamas and other Palestinian armed groups is that there is absolutely no justification for firing indiscriminate rockets at Israeli population centres in southern Israel. These actions are wholly unacceptable and they amount to war crimes.
It's very important that this time things change, that an independent and impartial investigation is carried out, and that those who are responsible for what we're seeing are brought to book, are held accountable. Otherwise, the likelihood is high that this sort of situation will be once again repeated, and basically those responsible for these violations should not be allowed to get away with murder.